I see a lot of top performing SDRs that, to our earlier points mentioned, are not clear from the get-go.
It shouldn't be about like negotiating or, trying to convince them of why you would be a good AE.
The most important thing you can do is just find a way to hit your number consistently and start getting better over time. Personal branding and having these conversations of going to account executive, where I see a lot of people misstep.
Use critical thinking. Actually, I've tried the same strategy at different organizations and gotten wildly different results.
You got to focus the things you can and can't control. My point being, if you're this SDR right now, the mistake that I see is... All right, man, back at it. I know we thought a lot about this one. We're going to talk about some of the things you need to promote from SDR to account executive. We're not only going to talk about our own experience. Obviously, we support tons of students who have now promoted from SDR to AE, both internally at their company and also externally. And yeah, we thought initially this was going to be like the top skills you need, but it felt too much like a cookie cutter LinkedIn post. And quite frankly, we've seen a lot of those. And while the individual topics may be obvious, we're actually going to talk about how this actually plays out over a 6, 12, 18-month timeline when you're an SDR. So I think if you're in that position where you're looking to promote, maybe you're even starting as an SDR or in the active interview process, these are the things that we would really recommend that you keep in mind, you develop over time. And yeah, Chris, I'll kick it over to you for any other thoughts.
Yeah, no, I think this is a really, this is a very vague topic because unfortunately the reality of everything is that sales organizations don't have a fleshed out version of how to promote their SDRs to AEs. And, there's a lot of journey docs. There's a lot of things that are like internal procedures that are coming from above when they're saying like, hey, we don't really see too much upward mobility. And so I think a lot of that stuff is quite frankly bullshit. So to your point as well, I think there are, certain things that leaders look for that are just kind of like a given, but that a lot of SDRs don't realize until they're probably 6 months in this limbo of hey, I'm trying to promote to AE. So what does that look like?
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll throw it over to you for different topics.
Yeah, and obviously there's timestamps below too if you want to jump around. But I think just for everyone's reference, again, the surface level of what we're going to talk about may sound like a little bit obvious, but again, we're really going to dive deep into these topics in a way I don't really think exists online. So first, we'll talk about really understanding what is and is not important for the account executive role, being very clear on the types of things you should be talking about in your interview, the types of things that maybe aren't as important as you might think, and I say this from my own experience. 2, building your internal brand over 6, 12, 18 months to be very clear and have a consistent message that your goal is to become an account executive. People take this for granted. I'm sure we'll get into it. Also, really understanding further qualification and I think highlighting some of the habits as an SDR that made you successful that you need to go further inwards on when you do get to these account executive roles and certainly in an interview setting, mock discovery call, etc. Also, we're going to make a dedicated section here. This is a pitfall we've seen, unfortunately, too many people fall into. If you want to be an SDR manager, great. If you want to be an account executive, do not become the SDR manager. Period. We'll get into that. And also make sure to leverage, I think something we often overlook, all the gong calls at your disposal, the account executives in your network at your company that have been through the same process. Those are the 5 major pillars we're going to talk about today. So yeah, Chris, I guess really starting with the first thing, if you want this one, feel free, but understanding what is and is not important when it comes to promoting to account executive. I can take it. You can take it as a starting point if you have a preference.
Yeah, I feel like you have a really good talk track for this one, so okay. I'll let you have it.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is a good one.
No, fair enough. I think, this is one that I really highlight a lot of times when we're working with folks in our SDR accelerator as well, where I think you've been the number 1 or top 10% SDR. They are hiring for multiple account executives. And when you're thinking back on your history as an SDR, the first things that come to mind are quota attainment. And I'm not even going to say good or bad, but quota attainment, your KPIs, the types of accounts you broke into, if there's any notable wins or spiffs or rewards that you won, those are all great. But I think really diving deeper into that and some of the pitfalls that I see, for instance, when I was promoting to account executive, one of the things I was preparing and thankfully had account executives kind of keep me in check is I was going to sit there and talk about how my email rates they would be opened 15% higher than my colleagues. I had done 20% more calls and emails every day. Some of that stuff was valid, but my point being is I kept pulling back that thread and going super deep into here's why I'm a successful SDR, not here's why I would be a great account executive for the team. And so these are the things when I work with our account executives, they always want to talk about, I made 100 dials when the expectation was 60. I got, my pipeline target was 1.5x average. And also I was like the number one 3 months in a row. Those are footnotes, and you should call them out in the interview. But beyond that, if you're going into like a discovery call and you think that your script is just going to carry you through, and you also don't really have a compelling story as to why you want to become an account executive outside of just like, it's time, I'm bored, I think that's where I see a lot of people get tripped up and focused on the wrong things. And last thing before I kind of hand it over to you is also thinking about kind of the right things, right? Instead of just saying like, hey, I made 20% more calls than every rep on the floor. I've been number one for 12 months in a row. I've won President's Club. And obviously, like, if you're promoting internally and you've done that, it's going to be hard to say no. But if you're kind of in that minutia, you're not the clear number one, you're not the clear favorite. And even if you are, I think transitioning that mindset from here's how many things I achieved to here's like why I was able to do that successfully. And what I mean is, really when you're organizing your territory, that's something as you become an account executive, especially in the SMB world, you're going to have hundreds, if not thousands of accounts potentially, depending on your company size, who you sell to. And if you're just sitting there and like telling me I can make 100 dials a day, it's like, cool, I get that. So can a lot of people who are ambitious. But if you say, hey, when I first started here, I was making 100 dials a day, and I actually realized I wasn't getting that much more of a result than my peers. What this led to over 3 to 6 months is I realized that these types of leads, or if I prioritize this type of company that we worked really well with and fit their tech stack, or maybe I found that, I don't know, engineers that were using AWS, this specific cloud technology, were always more receptive to conversations. I actually then started to organize my territory by these different things. And I actually found over time, even though when I first started, I was making 100 calls a day, by the time I actually got to where we are today, I'm making about 50. It's still hitting the requirements, but because I've organized my territory and I've set a lot of reporting in place, I've been able to actually get a higher result doing less pure number of volume by getting really strategic and organizing my territory. So I think that's like the fundamental shift. Hopefully that is encapsulated in more of this long form that I think is not on a simple LinkedIn post or whatever it might be. But yeah, what are your thoughts?
No, I think that's really solid. And I think this is where like the vague aspect comes into it a lot is I think if you like, it shouldn't be about like negotiating or, trying to convince them of why you would be a good AE. If you're doing that, you're probably already lost, right? Like they need to know who you are when you come into that interview process. They need to like know that like, oh, you are a consistent top performer, right? Like there's just table stake things like, for instance, hitting your number, being a top performer, like, this is like a whole topic that would be a separate video in of itself. But whenever you do have exposure to senior leadership, like what does that look like, right? Like for those 6 to 12 months before you get over there, because I mean, they frankly, and even like hitting your number as an SDR, like they don't even care about that because there's been so many hires that, have been promoted from SDR to AE that were top performing SDRs that don't end up really crushing, or they end up like, just losing their confidence because now they've been a top performing SDR for 6 to 12 months. Then they move into an AE role, and it creates this like trauma bond in a way where the entire org is like, wait a second, we can't promote SDRs to AE. Yep. So I think it's like this whole limbo, this unfortunate limbo where, you need to kind of go into that process, not having to convince them of why you'd be a good fit. Like they need to understand and know who you are and feel like, hey, like this person is not only a good SDR, but he would be a killer AE as well. And obviously like that ties into like all the other topics that we're going to talk about today.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, I think that's perfect transition, like building an internal brand. And I think this is something, quite frankly, you do better than me. So I'd love to get your thoughts on, again, for that SDR that's maybe just now breaking in, they're maybe been there 6, 12 months and they're trying to do that promotion. Over a 3, 6, 12 month horizon, what are the things you're doing specifically to build a very solid internal brand that sets you up for that promotion?
Yeah, I think for SDRs, I mean, and this was funny, we just have like, an entire cohort of students that are asking a lot of the same questions of like, oh my God, it's like week 3, and they're like, yeah. How do I position myself best for AE? Like, what can I do now? And I'm like, the best thing you can do is like probably not talk to people right now and just focus on hitting your number, right? So kind of going back to like what I said before was, I think the very first thing that you need to be doing for the first 6 months really is not trying to be a hero. Honestly, you look like a joke. If you try to like go to leadership and even like go outside of SDR leadership and talk to AE managers and talk about like how great you are, how you have this sequence that's just like, it's funny because like you would think that a lot of the same things that you're doing as an SDR would apply as an AE. But honestly, it's not the case at all. Like, should they be more intertwined with like sequences, with messaging, with, you know, all these like tiny little minuscule KPIs? Yeah, that might be good. But the reality of being an AE, especially like an AE manager, is like they're so stressed out. They don't even probably know about like outreach or SalesLoft metrics or sequences or different things like that.
Yeah.
And so I think like table stakes first 3 to 6 months is just like hit your number. And I think people will really notice if you're really crushing it. Like if there is really an internal kind of like environment for success and where people are like, hey, like that SDR is really going above and beyond. He's like 40% above the rest of the team. I think that speaks volumes, right? And then maybe if you have like 1 or 2, you know, unique opportunities to talk to like a leader. For instance, let's say helping out their team. I mean, really, it's not just about sending emails and booking meetings, right? It's also finding other creative ways to help your team out.
Yep.
Regardless if that's like, hey, you know, I know that this is outside of my scope of responsibilities as an SDR, but I know we have this marketing event coming up soon.
Yep.
How can I drive more attendance? Or like, what are we optimizing for here,
Yep.
right? And like not saying in a cringe way, but still where you're helping the team out in different ways where it shows that you have critical thinking abilities and where you can go a little bit outside of this little black box that's defined for you. But yeah, I think like absolute table stakes. And I think like to err more on like the safer side of what I'm going to say here, it's just focus on hitting your number. And then after that, like after 6 to 9 months of like hitting your number, crushing it, then you kind of have like, you've earned the right to go and have these conversations and put yourself on the map. And now you have some leverage, but
yeah. No, I think really well said. Like a few things come to mind and like I agree with and want to expand upon. Like one, when you get exposure to leadership and you're an SDR that has like 3 to 6 to 9 months of experience, and I'm talking like high up leadership, like CRO, SVP of sales, whatever it might be, quality over quantity, right? And there's so many examples, I won't go too deep down, but it's like, yeah, if you think having a conversation about like the Patriots or something is a great thing to like set you apart, maybe if they're like a diehard Patriots fan, but I also think it's like, it's okay, to your point, first 3 to 6 months, the most important thing you can do is just find a way to hit your number consistently and start getting better over time. I do think on the note of one thing I want to double tap into, because some real examples come to mind, is like if there's a marketing spiff, I wouldn't want you to focus so hard on like getting event attendees if it takes away from you hitting 100% of your number, because at the end of the day, that's the most important thing. But things like that are a great opportunity. And going back to my own experience, there were a few things like that where marketing really wanted us to promote a new product or get people to sign up. And when you do that, not only does it look good, but now you have a chance for marketing leadership to say like, oh, who's this SDR that just won this for us? And then your SDR manager is going to be like, oh yeah, they're 6 months in here. They've hit their quota every month they've been here. They're really killing it. And now that's almost like a free way to get exposure and in other ways that I think really helped me as well. And then I think, more on the note of, personal branding and having these conversations of going to account executive, where I see a lot of people misstep, is it is okay to be confident and change your mind like down the line. When I first got into sales, I was like, do I want to go the manager route? Do I want to become an individual contributor? When I got 2 to 3 months into it, I realized I wanted to go all the way to the enterprise individual contributor level. Certainly the compensation was a piece of that, but I always felt that if I didn't do that, if I didn't get that exposure, I couldn't be a credible manager really at any other level above me. So if I just peaked out at like mid-market, never went enterprise, and then tried to become like an enterprise manager, there's a lot that, I've seen people do it and I've seen people be successful, especially at bigger companies, but there is something to be said about at least being an individual contributor, probably at least a year at every level, that I think really gives you exposure. So my point being, if you're this SDR right now, the mistake that I see is a lot will say, they'll come in and they'll say exactly what I said, in the sense that they're like, yeah, I don't know, maybe I could be a manager, maybe I could be an account executive, I really just want to come in and hit my number and prove myself. Whichever path you want to go, if it's SDR manager or account executive, the best thing you can do is have like a strong hunch of which one you want to do. And even in the first 2 months with your SDR manager, no expectation that you get it anytime soon, but being very transparent there. saying, hey, like, you know, I've learned a lot about tech sales. Obviously, you have a long way to go, but my hunch right now is that I think I would be best served, like, really promoting to an enterprise account executive role and focusing on that before looking at management long term. So anytime those conversations come up, your SDR manager asks, the inside sales manager asks what your goals are, laser focused on whatever it is you want. Because the last thing, and this is a separate subject we have, is that if you don't say that, you start crushing your quota, you realize you want to become an enterprise account executive. If you have been that SDR, to your point, that's sharing some of their best things with the team, that's really helping everyone improve their game and is like setting the tone because you're crushing it, all of a sudden the inside sales manager, the VP of sales, your SDR manager is going to say, hey, you would be an awesome SDR manager. And if that's what you don't want, and you haven't been clear about that up front, they're going to start trying to push you that way. And it's just, it's not the end of the world. You can still get out of it, but you avoid that situation entirely if you're very clear and consistent with your brand. So those are real mistakes I've seen, by the way. I've seen account executives in my network that were an account executive for a year. They thought, they were like, yeah, I think I could lead the SDR manager or management team for a year. They end up doing that. They get stuck in that role for 2 years. And I talked to them, their original goal was to become an enterprise account executive. But all they have now is a year of account executive experience, 2 years as an SDR manager. Pretty much the only thing you can do now is just go back to being an AE if you want to get up to that enterprise role. So I'm jumping ahead topics.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to add there?
No, I think that's really good. And I think it's just about being laser focused, right? And I also think like extrapolating your timeline a little bit. Like I see a lot of SDRs getting into this role, and I think there is this skewed misconception that you can and should get promoted within 12 months.
Yeah.
Right? I think things have changed a lot. I think, you know, back then there was a huge need, like there was so much venture capital flowing. We talk about this a lot where obviously the times have changed. I don't necessarily think it's for the worse, to be honest. I think it's for the better. Like the truth is, like the reason why people were getting promoted in like 6 months, 9 months was just because there was just like so much malorganization across different orgs. And that obviously presented a lot of opportunities to the people that were crushing it, that were killing it. But I think that's honestly, that plays a huge role into it. Yeah. Like these openings to AE, they're not like as fluent as people think that they're going to be. They're honestly probably going to be the most chaotic thing ever. Like it's not going to be this journey doc that they've outlined, like a 23-page document about like how you need to hit your KPIs every single week. Like sure, an SDR manager can promote you for promotion internally, but that doesn't mean that the AE manager is going to even like give you a single ounce of like, you know, time. Yeah. Like an AE manager doesn't really care about a lot of these different things. Yeah. What they care about is like one, like again, table stakes. Have you been crushing in your role? Okay, cool. Now we can talk, right? Yeah. Now let's actually have a conversation and see where you're at, right? Like, are you mature enough? Like, how do you compare to like the other people that I'm talking to that are AEs and XYZ? Yeah. But I think there is this like weird misconception that like, oh, I've been an SDR now for 9 months. Like, I'm ready. You know, like I'm ready to go. Yeah. And so I think also being okay with this taking longer, like, you know, there's a lot of value. And I also see people like wanting to leave internally if they don't get that opportunity within 9 months or 12 months. And they potentially walk away from a really, or they actually do walk away from a really, really good logo where they otherwise could have had an awesome AE career, right? Just because like their ego got in the way of things where it was more important for them to, you know, go somewhere else and show them who's boss. And then they end up like, you know, going to some random small company that has no track record of success that doesn't, sure, OTE is great, right? Probably like double OTE, but actually what I've seen happening is people were making more money and had way more time as SDRs. And now they have the title, but they hate their lives. And now they just like, a lot of them even quit tech sales. So it's a very unfortunate reality of what I see happening. So I think just going off of what you said is like extrapolating the timeline, being okay with, you know, this process taking longer than 12 to 18 months. And honestly, the whole tenure of an SDR goes by so quick. Like, you know, it's like 1 quarter, you're just like learning and you're figuring out like what the hell is even going on. Yeah. Second quarter, okay, you're starting to see a little bit of success. Like third quarter, now you're like doing okay. And then fourth quarter, you finally have your systems down and you're already like there, right? Like you're already in the window of potential promotion path up to AE. So I think that's just what I would add is being okay with like extrapolating the timeline and not feeling like that you have to cram everything into like, you know, these golden opportunities with like, you know, managers. Anyway.
100%. Yeah. No, I think you're right. The timeline's definitely extended. And also it's like, you got to focus the things you can and can't control. Like if budgets freeze, if there's no, like you were a month away from that promotion and it got pushed 3 to 6 months, those things happen. And it's not even saying don't leave, but I see a lot of people make a knee-jerk reaction. In reality, 6 months is such a short time in this example where, I've seen some people that are crushing it. They're at a near or already market leader. They're right on the cusp. It gets extended and they leave and all that traction is gone. So anyway, I think we've covered that well.
Yeah.
And maybe going to the next one and a little bit more tactical as well. Getting into maybe like a mock discovery call. If you're in a situation where you're interviewing internally or externally, you got to prove yourself on a discovery call. I think this is one that obviously you have some things at your disposal. You can look at gong calls and all of these different things. But I think maybe I'll set the stage for this one and kick it over to you. But there's a habit that if you've been in the SDR role, even if you're crushing it, you're number one, you've optimized your workflow, you're working 3 to 5 hours a day, all of these different things, you forget that when you're making cold calls, yes, you are doing discovery. But your fundamental goal is to ask a couple of questions and create enough interest to just have a meeting. And I think when I see these SDRs that are crushing it, they're really great. I've seen some that get too confident and maybe don't really game plan on the discovery side. And they were one of the top 2 SDRs, but the other one got picked because they ran a much more effective discovery. So I have a lot of thoughts, but I'll kick it over to you.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, and I think the really important thing here is just that, like so far, the only thing that you've been getting compensated for and what you've been optimizing for is quite like, even if you have a prospect that isn't necessarily like qualified, you're probably like, if you are a top SDR, like you're trying to get the meeting, right? And sure, there's different stages and all those different things, but I'm not even going to get into that. So 100%, I see a lot of people make that mistake of not being able to like take a step back and look at like, okay, what am I actually going to be taking on now? Because like I'm actually going to be doing the opposite. It's going to be more about me actually figuring out who is worth my time, right? Like how can I qualify out the prospects that are least qualified for me and will waste my time essentially, so that I can focus more on the people that are worth my time. Yeah. And even just something as simple as, I mean, this is actually a great topic too, is like just what you think a discovery call should look like versus like, what it actually is like and what the reality is of whenever you get on these calls with like leadership and you're doing a mock discovery call, very, very often you probably haven't had any formal training of how to run a discovery call. Yep. And so you go on LinkedIn, you go on Google, and you're looking at like the top scripts, and you sound like a robot, and you're like hitting them with shit like like, hey, if you could wave a magic wand, I mean, it's kind of crazy like how many people actually use that.
Yeah.
But I think just like the way I think about it is like just be human. Yeah. Right? Like whenever you feel like something is completely unnatural to you, that's when you're like like you're not doing the right thing. Yeah. So even though like, yes, you are stepping into a new role, you would probably be surprised like at how human the entire process is still. Yeah. You don't have to like be an entirely different person. You don't have to like be crazy. Like, I mean, really, honestly, I don't follow like a framework anymore, like as an AE. Yeah. Honestly, like my best months have just been me connecting with people. Of course, like I'm still doing specific things, like making sure that like the timeline is there, that like I understand what their budget is. But you do these things more innately at some point. I'm not saying that like SDRs should just have this ability to do these things. But I think not feeling like it should be this super, super formal process, being able to like take a step back, tapping out. Anyway, I'm completely like off topic here, but I think it was pretty important to cover.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think in addition to that too, it's like the flip side of this is I think you laid out really well, like you need to prepare and have more of a game plan than just like everything that's up in your head. Because I'm sure you've seen some good examples. You've had some great cold calls, but that I think, the other side of this as well is maybe you kick off the call really well. And I've seen this before where SDRs will uncover some pretty good things, but they stop there. And it's more the muscle memory of you're optimizing again for that 3 to 5 minute phone call where you set up a meeting and that's it. And when that's the time clip you've always worked on, you haven't really developed the muscle to ask like deeper level questions. And I'm sure I could give many examples, but at like the simplest. Let's say you had a mock discovery call interview and your prospect says, oh, they need to scale. Oh, cool. Like, why do you need to scale? And they're like, well, our business is growing 400% year over year. And you're like, cool, that's awesome. I guess what solutions are you guys looking at? And you've glossed over so many things. Like, have they tried to scale in the past? Why is now the right time? It sounds like you've been growing a lot already. What other challenges are you running into? And there's so many hypotheticals here, I won't go down that road. But my point being is, again, just tying a bow on this, if you're used to that 3 to 5 minute interaction, and then you watch a bunch of gong calls and you think like in your head, like, okay, I'm good, I'm ready. I've seen a lot of people that show up and they get in these interviews and they even think they did a pretty good job. And they're missing a lot of opportunity that, again, if they're competing internally versus another SDR that's got pretty similar attainment, they're risking not being the clear front runner. And so these are the types of things that I really hope the SDR out there understands. But I think, across both topics, I think we covered it pretty well.
Yeah. I would say too, just like not to, overcomplicate by any means, but I will say, this is something that SDR managers see all the time. It's like, did you review your gong calls? But there actually is a lot of value to that. And I think also, like, again, this is such a vague topic because you also need to optimize for certain things during the interview process that aren't necessarily like a proxy or indicator for what you're going to be doing in the role. Yeah. So you also need to, apply critical thinking. Even if you're looking at these gong calls and you're looking at a top performer, you'll probably start to realize like there's certain things where you probably shouldn't be doing the same things. Not saying that you shouldn't be doing them from a performance standpoint, but during this interview process, how do you, one, exhibit some of those top performing skills while also checking off all the political boxes of like, hey, he understands, like we're doing BANT, we're doing medic, So it's a fine line of those different things, but the more exposure that you have to these things, the more that you talk to AEs, and you don't have to be like this annoying SDR of like, I'm trying to be an AE, and like, how do I do that the best possible way? Sorry, I'm not, but like, it's like, I think like you can do this in a very natural way, and I think the easiest way to do this is just listen to the gong calls more and more and more, and actually take note of like this is something that we teach of like how to come in and be a top performing AE, how to crush your ramp period, right? Yep. I mean, we can sit here and try to tell you about like all these magical strategies and all these different things. We take a much more like internal centric focus where, what's actually happening on the inside, right? The biggest proxies for success is not going to be us giving you some magical sequence or all that's like layer 3 kind of stuff. Yeah. The most important pillars for success are going to be looking at other people that are already crushing it internally, taking those elements and then applying it. And the same applies to going through like an SDR to AE interview process. Like instead of looking everywhere else, instead of internally, like you should just be focused on, analyzing those gong calls, exposing yourself to more AEs, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. But no, well said. I'm sure we could keep peeling that one back, but I think that gives a lot of perspective that I feel like is not even out there. Maybe, I know we talked about this a little bit, so maybe we keep this one a little bit shorter, but certainly the SDR manager role, like again, I want to be very clear. If you want to be an SDR manager, do it. But if you want to be an account executive, I see this trap so many times. I don't know if you want to kick it off. I can share my thoughts, but
I'll just preface it. I don't have a very strong opinion on it. So okay. I've seen like, and just to make it clear, like we don't necessarily have anything against the SDR management track. Yeah. I think the problem with it becomes, to your point, like if you're trying to be an AE, if that's your desired choice of career, then that is not the path that you want to go down because people don't understand the implications of what that does to your resume. Yeah. Right. And so like I've seen lots of SDR managers have very, very cozy jobs, making a lot of money. But at the same time, I feel like a better way to go about it, and this is just my 2 cents, is try to see how far up you can get on the ladder of being an AE. Yeah. And then you can always go backward. Right? Yeah. I'm not necessarily saying that SDR management is like backward, right. But I think it's a step that you take where now you need to be content with like, okay, it's going to take me like a year and a half to get back to where I was. And it's going to be like a lot of like, so if I'm going into sales development, I need to be ready to like commit to this. And I feel pretty confident like this is the route that I want to go. Yeah. And if you want to go back into being an account executive, the more pre-existing tenure that you had as an account executive, the easier it's going to be for you to go back into that. Yeah. But yeah, anyway, I'll throw it over to you.
No, well said. And I think like playing this out in a very realistic scenario as well, I see a lot of top performing SDRs that, to our earlier points mentioned, are not clear from the get-go that they want to be an account executive. And look, you can always change your mind too. If you start and you're on the outside looking in, you break into a company and you think that you want to be an account executive, so you voice that from day one, like, hey, I want to prove myself. long term, I want to be an enterprise account executive, you can change 6 months in and say, hey, I'm really enjoying this SDR stuff. I want to be an SDR manager. Like, that's not going to hold you back. But again, I won't rehash what we talked about of just being unclear, but I see a lot of top performers that get about that year mark into it. And now there's a couple open AE positions, and maybe as one example that we've seen of many, they either don't get it and or for whatever reason, they close the spots, they push it back 3 months, but they're going to open an SDR manager position. And I see so many people snap into that and think, okay, probably 9 months, maybe 12, and then I'll just be an account executive anyway. They're going to increase my base to pretty much my full OTE right now. I'm going to get, 130, I'm making 80 right now, and all of these different things. And again, if you want to be an account executive, it's a pretty tough trap, and it sets you up tough for a few things. Like business development, SDR manager, I think is a great track, especially if you're at a big company, because you can grow to then become like the director of business development. Like there are major companies that pay those types of executives very, very well. However, again, you can, to your point, you can always go from being AE back to being an SDR manager if that's where your true passion ultimately lies. The flip side is I've even seen SDR managers that were SDR managers after being an AE. They pretty much were like, oh, you want to go back? You can pretty much go back to the same position. Or I've also seen cases where SDR managers were in that position at very large companies. They built up enough trust to then be an AE manager, but not getting specific. This truly isn't anyone I worked with. It's through a network and colleagues of mine that just were sharing the situation over drinks. But I've seen situations where SDR managers that were pretty solid at what they did for 1.5 to 2 years, because they were the number one SDR manager, get promoted to account executive manager, and they fail. Their reps don't take them serious because they've never closed anything. And it's not just an optics thing. It's like genuinely, they maybe came from a different manager, or they're putting in the work to close deals, and they know the advice that you're giving is just truly not applicable.
Yeah.
So I think it's just, we should probably have a separate episode on this topic altogether. And I don't want to scare anyone away from being an SDR manager, because again, at some of the companies we've seen, there's SDR managers making 200 plus easy. You can get there quickly. You can also promote, if you're at a big company, to director level, all of these different things. So it's a very valid path. But if you want to be an account executive, you have everything to lose, in my opinion, by becoming an SDR manager, even if it's for a year.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe we move on, or anything else. Yeah.
No. I mean, I would just say also, like, be patient. Like, I think I see a lot of people, like, when you really extrapolate this out over, your entire career, then I know it can be really painful. Like, I talk to a lot of SDRs that are like, oh my gosh, I hate this. Mm-hmm. But I also see a lot of people rush into decisions where they take like a job at like a smaller company. They're just so happy they get like the AE role, and all the other SDRs in the team just feel like shit. It's like just being smeared in their face that like, hey, this guy or this girl just got promoted into account executive. Yeah. I've seen this go like one or two. Honestly, I actually have a lot of internal examples in my own network of people that just took that role, got out like 6 months earlier, and then ultimately ended up getting pipped. Just had like, they didn't have like an environment to succeed. Yeah. And they're unemployed, they're not doing well, or a lot of them, like, they had to go back to being an SDR. They're still SDRs, so now it looks even worse, because it looks like you tried to be an AE, you failed for 6 months, you went back to being an SDR. Whereas I see people that honestly take 6 to 8 months longer, but they're really like thinking about like, how do I set myself up for success as an AE? You also don't want this first experience as an AE to be so shitty, right? Like, that's really gonna like tarnish your entire view on the field. Like, it's already hard being an AE. If you don't put yourself in a position where you can win, then all of a sudden you're gonna walk away just like hating the entire career. And yeah, anyway, so I think that like the biggest gist of this is like, be patient, right? Operate on a longer timeline, and if you just like this can really, really shape or define your entire career. Yeah. So don't feel like just because somebody else is going away, even if they're going to Salesforce, even if they're going to whatever else, like, operate within your own timeline. Don't feel like because your entire team is gone that, again, if you've been an SDR for like 3 years, then obviously like, every single circumstance is going to be different. We're not telling you to like stick out a shitty situation, but if you truly are in a position where you're winning as an SDR, where you have like good work-life balance, and you have the opportunity to take a little bit more time to potentially get into a much better situation for your future career, absolutely do it. I think that's probably like the main thing that we're trying to get across here. It's just like, don't be silly, don't be reckless. I know that most people making that leap for the first time are young, they don't have too much experience. So I think that's kind of like what I would end on my end at least.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And I know we've got one major point. So maybe in closing, I think just kind of in a little bit more detail, making sure to leverage internal resources. And I would add, I think just having a very cohesive game plan going into this interview process, which sounds so cheesy, which is like such high level, dumb and obvious advice. But I want to break this down a little bit more. And maybe if it's okay, I'll start with my own anecdote. And it ties in a lot of what we talked about today. But when even SDR to AE, or if you're going from like SMB mid-market to enterprise account executive, again, one of the things that I struggled with and thankfully like certainly had gong calls, but you watch enough gong calls, you kind of get it. But don't just watch those gong calls and like put it in your head of like, this is what I think I should do. Like actually create, I hesitate to say a script, but a bank of questions. Like I'm not one to detail down to the exact word, but at a minimum, anytime, whether it's an interview externally, internally, I am always creating a bank of questions to where if I hesitate or if I freeze up, I can shoot my eyes down on my computer and like I've got the good questions I think I need to ask and keep the conversation going. There's a lot more I do, obviously know the product, that's kind of encompassed in this. But I really say this because I did a ton of that and I studied, and my approach, which I think served me well, was let me get my whole 30, 60, 90, all of these different things organized first before I ask account executives that are ahead of me. And I specifically asked an account executive that I trusted to review my approach. I was like, I got a 30, 60, 90. I've got a discovery call kind of template or script that I would love you to review. And also like kind of documented the wins that I had as an SDR and also an inside AE selling to SMB and mid-market. And he completely was like, let's stop. Like, this is completely off. I was totally focused on like pipeline generated, call metrics. Like I mentioned earlier, I was talking about, at the time I was a full cycle AE still. So I was doing some of my own prospecting and whatnot. And I was talking about how my emails were open 15% more than my peers. And I'm trying to position myself for an enterprise account executive role where a lot of that is like table stakes. And again, it's like at every level of this, there are things that you need to make sure you communicate if you are a top SDR, but it's got to be within the right context and you have to be much more forward looking. And so certainly gong calls are a great place to start, but I think also politically, before I hand it over to you, it's like getting real enterprise account executives that are verified top performers, that have a strong internal brand, that have already gone through that transformation, might be too strong of a word, but I really can't stress enough, like put the theory also with the reality. Don't just bank on having 10 gong calls and like looking through all the sales enablement docs that your company has stored and think that that's enough to get there. There's like a personal element of this. It's why we make these long form podcasts, to really give you like the verbiage, the psychology, whatever you want to call it, of the actual kind of reality day to day of how human beings are actually experiencing this role. So if that wasn't too meta, I'll pause myself, but any thoughts? Yeah.
No. And I think also like, use critical thinking, right? Because what's going to bring success, like it's funny, I've tried different I've tried the same strategy at different organizations and gotten wildly different results. And so I think that's also very important to call out, is like, this is why we don't want to like tell you exactly like this is what you should say, this is how you should do it, because every single organization is different, right? Like some organizations love if you come in prepared and you have like a 30, 60, 90-day plan and you're just like laser focused, like they're boiling down like every single little KPI week over week. And like some organizations do that, and that's the way that you stand out there. Yep. Other organizations way more laid back, way more chill. It's just like they probably don't even know like what your performance is like going into that thing, but they're just going off of vibes. Yeah. Probably like younger teams. Yeah. And so if you can just be very personal, I've literally seen bottom performers get promoted over people that are like, and I'm not even kidding, like over people that are like 150%, 200%. And obviously it wasn't great. Like, it obviously leaves the entire SDR team like, what the heck is going on? Right. But it just goes to prove that like, you've got to figure out like what game that you're playing, right? Depending on what organization that you're at, depending on the maturity, the size, all these different things, there's so many other factors that come into play here. I think what we talked about today was very like evergreen of like, I don't think you're ever going to go wrong, like trying to build like a relationship before you get into that process, regardless of which org that you're at. And if they do get mad at you for that, then probably it's not the best org for you. But yeah, I think just like understanding what game that you're playing, understanding how to win, right? Like talking to other people who have already been through that journey. If you are looking to make this entire leap, like internally, then looking for those clues there is going to be much more of like worthy proxies than trying to go on Google and LinkedIn and, you know, even the stuff that we're talking about here. I think even just us saying like, hey, just stay internally is coaching in of itself.
Yeah, for sure. No, I great call out. I think you captured it all, but I would say definitely, like I came from an environment where the CEO, my first sales job where I promoted from SDR to SMB and then mid-market, they were very like data driven, and they'd also were kind of like sporadic. So like some weeks it would be super chill, but some weeks it was like crack the whip. Like if you don't have your numbers, it looks really bad. And so that was that mentality that I had, is like always be very, very in-depth and prepared. And again, this is like many years ago at this point, but I interviewed externally, and that was like the only mental map I had of a company. And I could tell the manager, to your point, was like put off that I was like so buttoned up. Like I could tell he's like, yeah, it's not gonna work. You know? So I think really well said, and that's something I completely overlooked. But yeah, I think this is a great episode. I know SDRs like listening, hopefully got a lot out of it. Obviously, we do run the SDR to AE Accelerator at higherlevels.com. So we do have SDRs from AWS, Brex, Okta, Snowflake, etc. that are in there. And this is exactly what we teach. In addition to becoming a top performing SDR, we go very extensively into how to promote, how to do all these things. We also have live coaching, weekly calls, etc. And also, if you're listening to this on the go, we are on Spotify. But Chris, yeah, really great insights. I thought that was a good one. Any other thoughts before we sign off?
No, I think that's great. I mean, just, you know, hang in there. I know it's not easy. Like, you know, I think being an SDR is probably one of the most underrated things ever, especially like you have to take shit from people that will tell you like, hey, you just got to put in the work, you know, which is like, you know, it sucks, guys, but hang in there. Like this period of your entire career is very short-sighted. Like don't fall in, I know I'm repeating myself here, but don't fall into the trap of feeling like that you have to be ahead of everybody else. Be very calculated, play the long game, and that's really how you win, you know, in this game that we call tech sales. So,
Oh yeah. Well, appreciate it, everybody. We'll see you guys on the next one.
Peace.